India's Director General of Military Operations has held a press conference briefing the citizens about the need for an operation like Sindoor while informing about the incidents that have taken place since the 7th of May. The Director General of Military Operations, DGMO, are senior officials of the Army, usually of the rank Lieutenant General, responsible for overseeing all military operations in India and along its borders. Director General of Military Operations, Lieutenant General Rajiv Gaya, Director General of Naval Operations, Vice Admiral A.A. Pramod, and the Director General of Air Operations, Air Marshal A.K. Bharti, held the joint briefing. The dastardly attacks in the city of Pahalgam of Kashmir had left 26 innocents dead. It was after that when the Indian Armed Forces decided to take matters into their own hands and strike terror launch pads in Pakistan as well as Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. This led to the launch of Operation Sindoor. The Director General of Military Operations revealed a series of precise strikes targeting terror camps across Pakistan, including Muridaki and Dahawalapur, locations infamously linked to Kasab and David Headley. The Indian forces said it carried out 4 strikes on Muridak, used air-to-surface guided munitions and struck radar stations in Lahore and Gujranwala. On the 7th, Pakistani UAV targeted Indian civilian areas in waves, prompting robust countermeasures. The Indian Air Force and Navy coordinated operations across the Western Front, with strikes extending to Chaklala in Islamabad. Speaking at a special media briefing, Air Marshal A.K. Bharti confirmed the killing of over 100 terrorists, including 814 hijackers and Pulwama attackers. India stressed the strikes targeted terror infrastructure and not the Pakistani military, but warned that any hostile act would be met with a fierce response. The DGMO confirmed communications on the hotline with Pakistan, but said ceasefire violations began again within hours. India maintains its posture is defensive, yet determined, with full authority granted by the Army Chief. We are now joined by Air Vice Marshal Kapil Kak, who is a former Indian Air Force officer, and we're also joined by Major General Brajesh Kumar, former Director General of Infrastructure of the senior defence expert located in Delhi. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on the programme. Air Vice Marshal Kak, I want to start with you. Do you think India has reset the rules, as it says, if Pakistan breached this ceasefire, which we now have a confirmation from the heads of defence within India? Do you think this ceasefire will last, and do you think that the Indian Army have acted effectively during this entire Operation Sindoor campaign?
I think, Mr. Thomas, you've raised a very profound question, especially at this critical hour where there is a high level of uncertainty about whether the ceasefire agreement will last. Because only yesterday, when the ceasefire agreement came into effect at 5 p.m., 2 hours later, there have been intrusions by drones and unmanned aerial vehicles across wide geographies and varying levels of intensity, tantamount to high level of.
I believe we're having some technical issues there. We're going to have to move over to Major General. Okay, we are currently going over the press conference that just occurred with India's Tri-Service Media briefing on Operation Sindoor, who featured DGMO Lieutenant General Rajiv Gaya. Okay.
In a sense, most of what has been addressed already during usual briefings by the Foreign Secretary and the representatives of the Army and the Air Force. The change now was today, there was the Director General of Naval Operations also there, and the naval dimension has achieved a certain degree of clarity, because he did say, he didn't answer as to whether Navy undertook any operations in Karachi. He obviously implied that didn't happen, but he did make a very important point that there is a huge asymmetry which favors the Indian Navy, that the deterrent posture has worked, and the naval elements are dominant. The point I was making was something different. Your question. Your question, is there a new paradigm? Yes, there is. We have increasingly enhanced the envelope in terms of response. Mr. Thomas, you will recall in the Uri attack, we did some actions in terms of surgical strikes. In the action in Pulwama, you would recall that there was an air attack on the terrorist infrastructure in Balakot. And now, increasingly, in terms of range, after Pahalgam, what the Indian Air Force has done is to attack what you alluded to, the 4+5 terror target systems, 4 in Punjab and 5 in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So there is a new paradigm in the sense that if there's an attack, say 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, India has clarified unambiguously a terror attack will be taken as an act of war. So you will see similar application of force. What type of force, where, how, is not important at this stage. But any terror attack on India emerging from Pakistan as having been confirmed, there will be use of force against that terror attack system wherever it is emanated from.
Yes, I want to move over to Major General Rajesh Kumar, who is the former Director General of Infrastructure and a senior defence expert. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme. I want to talk about the language that was used during this press conference by the defence ministers. The DGMO has warned of a fierce response to any new violation. What does disproportionate force look like to India?
You see, the violations along the LOC have been off and on for a large period of time. There are ceasefire, and then the areas of intense shelling on for some reason or the other. Now, disproportionate means the one we saw this particular time. We had the Pakistanis troubling us right through the last 3.5 decades in the asymmetric warfare. So, whether it was an attack on the parliament, whether it was the Bombay blast, whether it was a terrorist attack on the civilians across the IB and the LOC, we had acted with restraint. The story this time probably says it all, that we did not restrain in our measure of offensive operations, which was well calibrated, precise, and focused. The fact that the first time we targeted areas in Punjab of Pakistan, and that too, the terror camps or the mosque where their terror camps was being run, be it Bhavalpur, Muridke, or Sial. And of course, in the POK as well. So we find that disproportionate response is one facet of it. The second is the mass artillery firing across the LOC. We have been firing at the military target, the Pakistanis post, their ranges. However, the same has not been true of the Pakistanis, where they have chosen to target our civilians' villages and thereby, killing them and their animal and other loss of life per se. So that disproportionate in this particular case is we have shown the path this way that in addition to the firing across the LOC or using some commando operations along the LOC, we have fired through air and the UAVs across various places in Punjab of Pakistan. So I presume there will be a higher level of force utilized and higher degree of precision. That is what possibly is meant by when we say that we will come back heavier, obviously to deter them. And this present the events in the last 4 or 5 days have shown that it has succeeded in some measure for sure.
Yes, I want to move back over to Air Vice Marshal Kak. There was rumours of these downed planes by Pakistan. Rafale dismissed those rumours in this press conference, saying that 5 Indian soldiers fell during the 4-day exchange. 0 pilot losses here. What does it mean? Disinformation has obviously been rife in this war. How important and how is transparency in this war, and how is the Indian government putting this forward? We've seen they've shown the images of the strikes which the Indian government did on the Pakistan terror attack at the terror camps. How important is transparency to the Indian Ministry of Defence?
There is an interesting question. I think I'll answer it in 3 specific points. Point 1 is that the era of conventional wars, not least even limited conventional wars, is over. We are looking now increasingly, and I don't want to go to Ukraine or to Israel, Hamas, but I'm talking in terms of India-Pakistan history of wars ever since 1947-48, when the first war took place within 9 weeks of independence of India and Pakistan. So currently, the war scenario being what it is, the first casualty is truth, the second casualty is logic, and the third is information. And I think information, communication, strategy, and disinformation are 2 sides of the same coin, employed and leveraged by respective sides as to what it gives them in terms of cognitive impulses and the optics of war. And this we have seen over the last 87, 88 hours of the conflagration between India and Pakistan. Now, insofar as transparency is concerned, yes, of course, transparency helps India. That's why the precision targeting of systems of terror and the indication of that to the whole world, showing the target system and showing the target system after it was struck, is in our interest, because we have, I mean, this is an important point in terms of proportionate and disproportionate expressions that have been used. India has all along said we have used measured, proportionate, focused, and precise weaponry against terror infrastructure from where the attack on the initial escalation that took place in Pahalgam. We stuck to that stance. It is only Pakistan, as is now well known, they can't find target systems in India. They can't attack civilians, which they have, close to the border. There is no terror infrastructure in India, so they can't go after terror infrastructure. So they went to the next level of escalation, which is the military targeting. Now that they would know would receive a very, very fierce reaction from our side. And here again, we were very, very measured in our initial response. You will recall that when a string of airfields and military installations, right from Srinagar in the north right up to Uttar Lai in Gujarat, in Barmer district down south. So all along they struck our military installations and airfield. And we only responded initially with neutralization of the air defense infrastructure in Lahore. 4 target systems, 1 completely destroyed, and 3rd, in a sense, neutralized with a soft kill, not a hard kill. And then when we saw some more actions from their side, there was no alternative but to strike their air bases. And the effects are there for everyone to see. The last point is about this downing of the aircraft. Unfortunately, even mainstream media, not just Indian, Pakistan, but also European, has been somewhat exaggerated in its commentary and its narratives. It started with an article in the Telegraph of the UK, followed by articles in Le Monde, and some articles attributed to Reuters, which talked about 5 aeroplanes, 5 combat aircraft of India having been downed, and the source was source. It was not said who said it. So there has been some degree of speculation, exaggeration. I think this was clarified by the representative of the Air Force at the briefing just held an hour ago, Air Marshal Bharati, that we downed a few Pakistan Air Force aircraft. This has come officially. Now, how few is few? It's for you, Mr. Thomas, to see. Whether it's 3, whether it's 4, how much is few, quote unquote. Insofar as our own casualties are concerned in terms of aircraft, we rightly said that the post-ceasefire also actions are taking place across the line of control and the border. If that is happening, then we are still in a kind of a military situation. Therefore, giving exact numbers, I tend to agree, would not be an appropriate step at this point of time.
Yes, I want to bring you some more information now. One of the major targets was the Muraduk camp, the Murkaz Taiba in Muraduk near the Lahore, deep in Pakistan, is an infamous camp as the camp where the terrorists involved in the 26/11 Mumbai attacks were trained. The footage shared during the press briefing revealed the impact of the terror infrastructure. The precision targeting ensured that only the intended targets were hit, demonstrating the country's commitment to countering terrorism effectively. I want to go back to Air Vice Marshal Kapil Kak once again. Oh, apologies, Major General Rajesh Kumar. Terrorism is a crucial word in this war. There has been wide media speculation, mainly from the international media, using different words to describe India's operations. Do you think India is, do you think the West and do you think the rest of this international coverage is learning that this in fact is a war on terrorism and not on the country of Pakistan? Has India made that clear enough, do you think?
Well, to a certain extent, yes. Let's look at the facts to start with. See, Pakistan has been fighting an asymmetric warfare, or shall we say a grey zone warfare since last 3.5 decades. That's a long, long time. So initially focused on Jammu and Kashmir predominantly, but also other places. Now, when you fight a war, which probably now Indians have started paying back in the same coin, because we are a little more, shall I say, worried about opinions, wanted to raise issues in the international forums and what have you. And we have basically interest in getting after the terrorists and the target. Now it's a very welcome change. We are not only going after the terrorists and the targets, we are also hitting the terrorist handlers. Well, in this case, it happens to be the military. And we have seen it this particular time. The first wave, of course, when we decided to strike, it was a terror attack.
Yes, I want
It did invite a response from the other side. And then what we did, we went through the air defense, or we neutralized or suppressed the air defense capabilities of the Pakistani. Went through and hit targets in the deep. Talk of the bases in around Sakkar, Rahim Yar Khan, Jacobabad, or up north, the main base near Lahore, near Rawalpindi. These are fairly deep targets. And not only that, we haven't possibly talked about much, but I see the report. We went after their end targets as well to some extent, and that got them worried. In Sargodha, there's an airfield there. There is a nuclear power plant close by, as also a storage of ammunition, missiles, and nuclear weapons. The target was hit, obviously. The nuclear arsenal is kept further deep away from the strike penetration of the enemy aircraft carrier munition system. And this possibly showed the Pakistanis or moved them or shook their leadership per se. Not only that, thereafter this, they wanted to speak to us. They also went running to the Americans, or possibly Americans saw their movement. And therefore,
I do apologise. We've got some more information coming in. India also successfully struck Jaish-e-Mohammed's headquarters in Bahawalpur. Bahawalpur is considered to be the stronghold of India's most wanted terrorist, Masood Azhar. Azhar, who heads the Jaish-e-Mohammed terror group, has been sheeted in several cases from the 2001 Parliament attack to the 2019 Pulwama suicide bombing. According to reports, Masood has 2 houses in Pakistan's Bahawalpur, with one located right next to the Osman O. Ali Masjid. The second house of Masood is also located in Bahawalpur, nearly 4 kilometers away from the first. Today's briefing showed the significant damage to key buildings. The precision-guided munitions destroyed their structures, achieving the mission's objectives, part of a broader strategy to dismantle the terror networks. Air Vice Marshal Kapil Kak, I want to move it back over to you. We've learnt about these terror groups which India has targeted. How much of a dent has Operation Sindoor so far put in Pakistan's terrorist infrastructure? Obviously, we don't have the specific intel on this, but given the information we have, how much more terrorism do you think is occurring in the region, and how much good do you think Operation Sindoor did in regard to eradicating it from Pakistan?
That's a challenging question,
yes.
And I'll answer it perhaps starting with the beginning. Pakistan lost the 1971 war against India with 93,000 of their prisoners of war in our hands. And the Indian construct, both in terms of decision-making, evaluation, and long-term thinking, decided rightly, we return the prisoners of war and we hope for peace. But that unfortunately did not happen, because within 2 months of the war ending, we had then President Bhutto preside over a meeting in Multan. This has been well chronicled over the years in the international media, that we must have a nuclear weapon. Why I'm raising this? Because it sort of creates the overall framework within which conventional war and terrorism are plugged in. And nothing better than the statement made by General Aslam Beg, who was the army chief of Pakistan in June, I think first week of June 1989, And his words, and I quote, his words were, until now we had no strategy against India, but now we have in place a very effective strategy to ensure that we are able to achieve parity with India, and we will not go through a 71 like experience. And that was overarching framework of a nuclear weapon. Because by 89, they had a nuclear weapon capability. Under that nuclear weapon capability, which was supposedly a defensive, they would undertake offensive operations against India. That year was the beginning of terrorism as a state policy by Pakistan. So that's what my colleague also referred to. It's been going on for 35 years. Now the question about have we made a dent? Now terror infrastructure, a country like Pakistan is all terror infested. You had the funeral of the person who was killed in that terror attack. Incidentally, I'd like to clarify. It is against Indian policy to not respect religious and other institutes of faith. So mosque is a sacred thing for us. So is a temple and a gurdwara for the Sikhs. So therefore, the location of the terrorists and their infrastructure inside mosques is their policy. So we did not, we actually didn't target the mosque, but the infrastructure inside the mosque. That needs to be clarified. Third, it is not possible to end terrorism with one highly successful operation, which Operation Sindoor, as you asked, has actually been. It has been a triumphant success of shock and awe, if I can use a borrowed expression of the US, that Pakistan was stunned. They would not expect such an action, offensive action by India, so precise, so focused, and so devastating in its impact. And it is then that they raise up the ante to the military level. Now, this is a success. We have seen that ceasefire has been initiated partly by the Pakistan army because they couldn't carry on this campaign for long. Simultaneously, world capitals, particularly President Trump and his colleagues, and in West Asia, Prince Mohammed bin Saeed of Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Zayed of UAE, they have been burning the wires with communicating with leaders from both India and Pakistan. The Iranian foreign minister was here on a scheduled visit, but the Saudi Arabian Minister of State for Foreign Affairs arrived here virtually overnight to start talking to Indians and then went to Pakistan. So the international community's role in diffusing the crisis was not so much to help Pakistan, it was to ensure that there are already two wars raging in the world and they didn't want another war to start. That's why I said at this point of time, we have to watch tonight. If this particular violation of the ceasefire, which came into effect last evening at 5 o'clock and actually got violated within 2 hours, if this doesn't happen tonight again, then we can look forward to some sustained ceasefire between the two countries and some toning down of the high temperature which we have witnessed in the last 3 or 4 days. But if it doesn't, and if Pakistan continues with this violation tonight as well, then I'm afraid the expression you used, that there will be a very strong response by India to whatever they do. So unfortunately, we hope, unfortunately, whatever happens as a consequence will not necessitate our response.
Yes, we have some more information. The Indian Air Force struck 8 military sites in Pakistan, including radar units and ammunition dumps with air-launched precision weapons. India targeted Pakistan Air Forces bases at Rafiki Murid and Chak Lala. The IAF also struck Rahim Yar Khan, Sukur, Chunian, Pasra, Jacobarabad, Sarkodha and Bolari as well. I want to come back to you, Major General Brajesh Kumar. given the scope of Operation Sindoor on terrorist infrastructure, both in Pakistan and in POK, can we just talk about the lack of civilian casualties, or the minimal civilian casualties? How well have the Indian government and the Indian Defence Force done in minimizing civilian casualties in this conflict?
You see, the Indian preparations started a bit earlier with regards to enhancing our civil defense systems and, sensitizing the population per se in big cities as also in the area close to our international border. So therefore, we are fairly well prepared. As far as the shelling and other aspects are concerned along the LOC, that we are pretty much there are battle procedures and drills, and people and the security forces in turn are aware how to manage. So that aspect has generally been taken care of. Obviously, India is a much larger country. Our depth of penetration and strike has been very, very. Fortunately, Pakistan, being a smaller nation, has a much smaller reach elsewhere. That is the major one major difference which happens between two of us. The other aspect which supports this, which supports the war or a battle, I think during the hostilities, it is the IMF which bailed out the Pakistani with some money to fight a battle. But do they have enough resources to move?
Air Vice Marshal Kapil Kak, I want to move back to you and once again talk about the precision of these airstrikes and the fact that civilian casualties were minimised by the Indian Army. What are your thoughts on the way that they carried out these strikes and the planning behind the precision and the direct targeting of terrorist infrastructure?
Is that question to me?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay. I think 4 or 5 points here. The first is minimization of civilian casualties has been one of the foremost aims of the use of force in this conflagration from our side. But unfortunately, a similar kind of strategic and operational level wisdom has not visited the Pakistani army psyche, because we have seen that constant firing and artillery barrages have been unleashed on the line of control. We had an agreement in 2003. Then in 2021, we again had an agreement, and which has been effective till this incident. That firing went on. I may like to share with your viewers, Mr. Thomas, that we have a town of Punch, which has a population about 475,000. Almost the entire town was evacuated. They were advised to move out to safer locations because the artillery barrages didn't come on Indian military posts. They came on the civilian population of the town. Now this is against humanitarian law. It's against the law of use of force in international conflicts, but that's happened. For our side, we have kept the casualties to the minimum, because I'm repeating myself, because you asked this question again, I must repeat it, that it has been the finest weapons of war available in the world today have been employed by the Indian Air Force, and I wouldn't like to name those weapons. It's not appropriate. The targeting is to the extent of 3 meters, 5 meters. Now you can close your eyes and imagine what is 3 meters accuracy. So there's no question of any civilians being killed through military action that we have taken as a riposte to the Pakistani military action. I want to bring you back to the initial statement I made, that the Indian military, political, strategic directive for this campaign was focused entirely, I repeat, entirely on the terror infrastructure, because that is where the terrorists at Pahalgam took the lives of 25 Indians and one Nepali citizen rather savagely. So it had to be just terror. And therefore, even in the terrorist camps, the distinction was made between areas where there were civilians in the immediate vicinity and terror camps where the people, based on intelligence, were actually terrorists. So with all this put together, we don't know exactly the details, but the report was, statement was made by our representatives during the meeting of the Director Generals of Operations this evening, that about 100 terrorists were killed. And they didn't give any reports of civilians. And I do not think there have been many civilians killed. But on our side, the casualties are rather low, primarily because we took precautionary measures, whether it was civil defense action, blackouts, or the citizens' participation, evacuation of civilians from areas which were vulnerable to heavy mortar and artillery shelling by the other
Air
side.
Vice Marshal Kapil Kak, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but we've run out of time on the discussion. I also want to thank my guest, Major General Brajesh Kumar, for joining us in that discussion. But we move over to the